back today for one of our more serious episodes, but one of our more fun guests. We will discuss many things. For the longer version, all the juicy tidbits, check out the Patreon. My name is Ashley Clements,
And my name is Jay Bushman.
and this is the Look Back Diaries. Who knows? It's finger guns at this point. We've been doing this a while. Thank you for joining me again. One of our
Absolutely.
more popular guests, I'll say. The
Mm.
comments are always like, Jay is so smart.
It's only editing.
And the ADR that I fill in for you.
That too. That too. Yeah.
Yes. Jay is here on this very special Gigi episode because Jay wrote this episode, which we have talked about a bit in the past. I expressed that I remembered 10 years ago that you wanted to write this episode, that you felt attached to Gigi, and that I didn't at the time really even know how long you had been writing that character and thinking about her journey. And so tell us about that. Tell us about finally getting to this kind of big reveal that you had been planting the seeds for almost a year.
It was really amazing. We talked before about how, we started trying to figure out Gigi's story from the very beginning and mapping out, if not the specifics of everything that happened, just a general timeline of the relationship between Gigi and Wickham, and when Darcy would have found out about that, when that got broken up, and what Gigi's sort of arc after that was. And so, we were writing, both me and Alex were writing for Gigi for months and had spent a lot of time thinking about what this character was going through and where they were going.
And we've discussed previously, in case anyone's forgotten, that she was posting "This Is My Jam" songs,
Yeah,
that playlist was expressing a lot of what she was going through at the time, the
yeah,
breakup,
yeah.
and the timing of that was right around the beginning of
Yeah,
the
we
Lady
started
Bennett.
from the very beginning with Gigi posting her jams. And then at a certain point, can't remember exactly, but it might have been around the holidays, she started tweeting and talking on social. And we knew that she was going to appear late. And when I talk about the things that really blew me away about the show, I think a lot about the work that Allison Page, who played Gigi, and Daniel, who played Darcy, how both of them had to step in to create a character that we had spent months creating through other form. And that people had a picture in their head of who these people were, and they had to step into that and embody it. And that's tremendously difficult.
Such a good point that part of what we were looking for in the audition was someone who made the character that had existed make sense. And it's something that I was more cognizant of in terms of casting a character like Darcy, who we had an impression of.
Mhm.
But in this case, no one had done any kind of impression of Gigi, but she had this full social life that
Yeah.
needed to make sense.
Yeah, and then the other angle to that is that if you've been following the social version of her, or if you know the original version, there's this like dark, tragic thing that happened. And then we put her on screen and she is so joyful and so excited. And being able to merge those two lines of emotion, being able to use the backstory and the social as the dark undercurrent behind all of the happiness and joy that she was displaying. And then this becomes the episode where we have to marry those two things. Like we always knew like there was gonna come a moment where those two lines would have to cross. So when we knew that was coming, I really asked for the chance to do that, to write that one.
Do you remember in the writer's room when the decision was made that Gigi would be the one to reveal her own history with George? Because that is, our own creation. And of course, it
Yeah.
gives the character much more agency. And it would ultimately, in the context of the show, I think, feel wrong for it to
Yeah.
be any other way. But obviously, that decision had been made by the time the Darcy letter
Yeah.
was written. So, like, at least, 25 episodes
Yeah.
or so ago. But do you know?
I don't remember specifically when that was decided, but I do remember that we spent almost the entirety of the back half of the show discussing every possible iteration of who finds out what when from who. And that
Mm.
it sort of was the double-edged sword that like we had so much fun with the social and the accessibility and getting the information from all the different vectors, but we always were talking about like, is this believable? Is this credible that like someone would say something like this on social? Having discussions about like, well, maybe it's not credible, but we need it. So there comes a point where this is just the show we're doing, and you just have to, accept it and move on.
But that's such a great point, and it's something that like has come up on the show. I think specifically starting around with the Darcy letter, the idea we had to do things differently on the show because of the public format, that
Hmm.
suddenly story elements where certain characters know things and certain characters don't are very difficult to navigate. It's sort of like adding this extra obstacle course, some extra challenges that Austen did not have to contend with.
True, but I also think that's one of the reasons why this particular text works so well in this particular format. It is at the end of the day a story about what people know in public and what people know in private, and how things change when that changes. So as much as we could litigate, and we did, and I know audience members did, and everyone has their own personal line of like, you go this far, I can't believe it. If you're going to work in this format, that's just something that has to be negotiated with. But I think at the end of the day, we got a lot more out of it than the handful of places where maybe it didn't always quite make sense.
What you're expressing is that a lot of thought was put into it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes there wasn't a great option. And what it ultimately did, it changes the characterization of Lizzie.
Hmm.
That Lizzie is a person who would share these things. And it's why we get into conversations about like, well, like Jane was never going to have a vlog, so we
Hmm.
couldn't do things with that character. It becomes one of the ways that she grows is
Hmm.
recognizing that this is inappropriate. It also is so in line with 2012 YouTube culture as well.
Yeah.
The people who were following real vloggers, like there was drama,
Hmm. Oh yeah.
in some ways much less in our show. At least ours was scripted. But so it wasn't entirely unbelievable that characters, or that Lizzie at the very least would put all this out there. Well, we've now talked a lot about it. Let's,
Let's watch the episode.
as I recall, part of this or some version of
Here,
this
Beverly, they've been open for
was
almost 3 weeks now, and
Allison's
they've still
audition as
been
well.
surprising me. They've got a
I
whole
don't
list of
remember, but I would
recommendations
not be
from people.
surprised because
So
we
It may
knew
have
that
just
we
been
were.
the sort of
wanted
like
to talk to you
audition
Yeah.
about
version
things.
of it. Like it may
Yeah.
not have even
Is
been
this a
what
real
you wrote
thing
yet.
or more math? No, it's pretty serious.
Something. Or more math.
Now that I'm watching it, I
Sorry,
believe,
I
I
just
want to say, I don't know this for sure, but I'm having a memory that from the previous
sorry.
question about when did we decide it
But
was going to
I
be
totally
Gigi,
respect your privacy, and
to
contrary
tell
to
it.
what
I
many
have a
would record this
memory of somebody bringing up the
because
point
your viewers
that
need to
it
know.
was going to be important for this story to come out in Gigi's own words,
Whatever happened to you
and to
guys?
give
What was
her
it with
the
you?
power
You don't
and
almost
the
even
choice
see
to
him.
share it herself.
No, but I
And
always
that's
wondered.
what this conversation right here is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Gigi Darcy,
Yeah.
and
Her
I'm the
coming
person
in
who
really
interviewed
having
George Wyndham
decided, yeah, to
and me.
to tell this. And
Yeah.
Lizzie at this point even only knows
For the record,
sort of
I
like
think this
Darcy's
might be a
version, which
travesty.
can't have been very
Especially
long, right? She
Yeah.
not
must have just
because
basically heard like he
we
took advantage of her and
Yeah.
he sucks.
Yeah.
That's how Darcy writes. He
Yeah.
sucks.
So the letter, Darcy's letter, there was something else that I didn't tell you.
It was about me and George. We were.
Involved?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. I
It's interesting.
you
Okay, I'm
have to
just
understand, George
looking at
was
these
always
these
around
women
when
kind
I
of
was
like
growing up.
deciding how
I
to
had a crush on him before I
tell
even
this
really
story,
knew what
and
Hmm.
that
this
meant.
is a real like women supporting
He was
women
always so
episode.
Charming?
I mean, I remember watching this when it was done
He
and
always was
thinking
charming,
about how
but
hard a job
on
you
so
have
many different
in this
wavelengths.
episode to,
Hmm.
you
There's
know, to still be there,
something that
not
makes
vanish,
me
but
enjoy
also
actual
not pull
conversation.
any focus
yeah,
from her, and the
questions
the
for a long
constant
time.
moving the
Or
attention back to
George
her,
just
leaving the space for the
wouldn't
the
tell me
story.
when.
It's
Well,
nice
thanks.
work.
Well, Thank you. But I think it was well written because I don't remember that
Well, thank
being
you.
a particular challenge. Like I remember
Mhm.
really being caught up in the feelings of like wanting to protect her, but also supporting, what she wanted to do and just being in character. But I don't remember being like, oh, how do I?
There was a line that Gigi just said about the thing about, well, you know how when you're trying to protect someone by not telling them something, you end up endangering them. And
Hmm.
this comes directly from a thing related. And I wrote a little bit about this after the show is over, about how, I mean, it's apples and oranges, but I am an older brother. I have a younger sister who is I'm very, very close with. She's one of my favorite people in the whole world. And around this time, she had gone for genetic testing and discovered that she was carrying the BRCA1 cancer gene, and ended up making some very drastic decisions for her personal health around that. And the conversation in our family was about, should you get tested? And there were lots of people who were saying, I don't want to get tested because I don't want to know. And so this idea of ignorance not actually protecting you from something was in the air in my head in my conversations with my sister around this time. And so I put some of that into why Gigi feels the need to come clean here and to talk about it, to reveal it.
And of course, it is at the same time that anyone who's also watching the Lydia Bennett has been watching their relationship evolve and notice many of them noticed a lot of red flags and many of them didn't, which
Yeah,
is part of what is so powerful about it is
yeah,
like, okay, now watch it again,
yeah,
knowing what you know.
yeah. There's also
And
something about having Lizzie confronted with someone in this moment saying, I believe this very, very strongly, and I had to change my mind when I saw the truth is a very important moment for Lizzie to see that happening.
we're also seeing, in the whole theme of ignorance does not protect people, we're seeing this character make a choice to say people need to know this,
Yeah,
while Lizzie has chosen not to tell her
yeah,
sister this.
In your videos even comes close to what I've said about him to his face.
Really?
And, again, Allison did such beautiful work
yeah,
here. Like,
yeah.
After a while, I realized he was right.
and Allison's job is very hard too, because
Yes.
like
In the end, I am
it's a lot of monologuing, it's a lot of like telling this story, it's finding the emotional beats in it where it still sticks, but where she, you know, can get through it. And
Anyway, thank you.
she had to, create a whole
Please let me
world
know when you post this and
for
don't
that
delete
to
anything.
have emotional resonance for her, and she does it really
This is
beautifully.
maybe a little bit of the
Whereas
crying.
like the rest of us had actually like interacted with those characters.
So are
She
we
Yeah,
never
recording for this
had a
weekend?
scene with
I really
Wes.
look forward
Like,
to
yeah,
showing you the city.
yeah. And so looking at it again, I'm reminded of like one of my
Yeah,
favorite. I remember this moment when I was writing it is hitting on the idea of calling back to Wickham using the term peach, and how
yeah.
learning that he
And that
used
makes
it
everyone
with
so mad.
Gigi retroactively makes every time he used it earlier just icky and gross.
It makes us hate him so much. It's one of those things because like the comments are all like peach, like they're
Yeah.
so mad.
I remember finding that while I was writing it and just knowing, like, like you just stumble on something, you're like, oh, that's going to work. I was very, very happy about that one.
And what a great payoff as a writer when you're like, oh
Yeah.
God, that's so simple and it's just going to
Yeah.
create such an emotional response in people. Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
satisfying.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in the past with the social media parts of it, as one of the things I always love doing is planting things that retroactively change your understanding of things. Like you get a new piece of information and suddenly everything that happened before is wider and bigger. And Peach felt like a way to do that with Wickham, especially as we're about to detonate it with Lydia.
Well, let's take a look at the comments. Jackie Perez says Gigi saying no one's ever needed me before ruined me. Ruined me. Think about it. Lydia, in one way or the other, wants to be wanted. She wants validation and for someone to want her. He's taking advantage of Lydia the same way he did with Gigi. If that's not foreshadowing, I don't know what is. Alexandra L. Hart saying I never realized before, but Darcy's way of dealing with Bing and Jane is just like his way of dealing with George and Gigi, even influenced by it. Gigi was sweet, young, naive, generous, open-hearted. All the same things are true of Bing. Darcy saw how badly hurt his sister was by a money-grubbing love interest, and when he saw his friend in what seemed the same situation, he did the same thing. He's abrupt and harsh only to protect people. Still, it was a fault in judgment for him to see Jane as another kind of Wickham. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of my patrons actually commented on a recent Bing episode making the same point that, oh, this is a pattern that Darcy is seeing. And
Yeah, and I think we talked about this previously, that when we sat down to do the timeline of when things happened before the start of the story, this was one of my like big eye-opening moments, that the thing with Gigi and Wickham just happened. It's been a couple of months. I forget exactly what the timeline is, but it's really fresh. So the idea that Darcy is seeing exploitive people all around him and his family is a fresh wound. I was really interested in playing that up because it makes Darcy's pride more reasonable.
many people have said something like this. Bryn Catherine says, I love how in this version it's Gigi, a woman, taking her story into her own hands. She's the one that makes the choice to share it, not letting the men keep it a secret. And yeah, we couldn't have done it any other way.
Yeah.
Our whole show is women telling their own story.
Yeah.
You clearly got to some people with the elements of what leads people into some of these abusive relationships and the vulnerabilities. Jenny Lou here saying, I like how Gigi has to consciously move away from blaming herself, and I let him too. He moved in with me. And by like, I mean it physically pains me. But yeah, like you can see the healing work that she's trying to do. And also, it's a good reminder that that doesn't all happen at once, that it's a constant
It's a
process
time.
and that
Yeah.
it's okay to have to catch yourself.
And that's one, I think, one of the really great things about this format is it gives you the time. It gives the character the time. It gives the audience the time to go through that journey with the character, and it makes it feel more earned, more lived in.
And Dan the Reb highlights a line that you also highlighted. Keeping someone ignorant isn't protecting them. It can actually endanger them, you know. The foreshadowing, these writers and their brilliant little literary twists. We'll end on that comment because
I'll take it.
it's
Sure.
praise
I
to
like a
you.
twist.
A beautiful episode and a beautiful arc for a character that you were writing before she had a body, and then Allison came and embodied
Yeah.
so well.
And I think, one of the things about the project of doing any kind of adaptation of a literary classic, especially something so high in the canon like Pride and Prejudice, is that these characters have been talked about and written about and thought about and cared about for centuries. And it's really easy to see them as archetypes, as immovable, unchangeable objects that represent specific things. And when we're trying to embody them, it's on all of us, the writers, the actors, and everyone involved, is to how to take those figures and make them real people again. And I never get tired of that. I always find that to be an enjoyable and challenging project to take on.
We're very grateful for your contributions to this one. We'll have you back soon to talk more about exciting behind the scenes things that people may not have even realized were happening.
Okay, sounds good. Look forward to it.